Today is January 18th, 1991, the day after the burial service of Gerald Wilson Dana. I'm here with our friends Byron Burke, Wes and Priscilla Owen, Glenn Rostow, and my parents Pat and Cliff Stratton. I'm Margaret Dana. I'd like to recount some of the final moments of Gerald's time on this earth. I guess about 4 years ago was when he first started getting the cancer. His death certificate records that about 2 years ago it developed into, that's when we first discovered it, with that huge 14-pound tumor, of course, that we had to have removed with part of his colon. And then finally, 3 days before he died, because of the chemo treatment that he was having at the time, it caused his platelets to go extremely low, and so his blood count was really off, and he wasn't able to coagulate the blood, so he was hemorrhaging quite a bit. And he was in a weakened condition, and so a yeast infection, Candida cepias, what they called it, was enough to, in 3 days, be more than his body could withstand. And so that's what they say is the cause of death as a result of the cancer that he had started 4 years ago. But about a month and a half ago, when he was in the hospital for another chemo treatment, his first of this experimental treatment, the doctor had told us that there really wasn't much hope left, and so he would keep fighting as long as Gerald wanted to fight. And Gerald was such a fighter through all of this that he said, well, let's try the experimental stuff and let's see if it'll work. And he, before we could do that, he had started to hemorrhage again, and so the doctors finally, though we almost lost him one night, were able to get him back on track again. But after that scare, he had been in such pain, and it really frightened him, and he called some of his friends around him at that time, and Dave Schertz and Paul Demeter came over, and there were 7 elders of the church who came over together and gave him a blessing, and he felt like he would do pretty well. Anyway, at that time they gave him a blessing to get him through this treatment, and he did fairly well. And then we had he again hemorrhaged again, and he had really decided that enough was enough, and he had called all the children in and talked with each one of them in the hospital room and had said his goodbyes to them, and each of them committed to get married in the temple and to stay close to the Lord. It was quite a touching morning. And then he asked Dave and Paul to come and give him a blessing to release him from the earth, because he was through. But at that time they said, well, we'll do that, but we also are going to petition that the Lord give you more time with us. And so they did that. And apparently his sojourn wasn't over at that time, because he did live and was able to come home for Christmas, and we had a beautiful Christmas together. The 3 oldest children, Carrie, Margot, and Kimbo, helped to carry him up and down the stairs, and Benji and Lizzie would help with his feet when he tried to walk, and we just all pulled together. It was a beautiful experience. Then he was feeling so great for about 2 weeks just after Christmas, and we had a chance to get a lot of last-minute paperwork done, and we did a lot of talking and planning, and he insisted that we have our personal prayers together each night. It was, again, a very special time for us. And we were going to go in again for another chemo treatment to see if maybe it would work. But this time, the treatment was more than he could withstand, and on Sunday morning, he called home. In fact, he felt so good the night before that I decided I didn't need to stay the night there. He just was feeling so good and was so talkative and just so excited about life and was just really, quite animated. And the next morning he called quite early and said, I just have to call my friends. I've got to have my friends here. And he couldn't remember Bishop Johnston's phone number, so he had already called Dave Schertz, and Dave and Paul said they'd be right over, and he had called Bishop Johnston, I guess, to get a hold of Paul so that he could come because he was in a meeting. And they both just dropped everything, and the two of them and Yolanda went over to visit with him. And they just had a beautiful morning together. And they said he was, again, just so talkative. It was just like Chuck mentioned, his spirit was so excited, and there was so much he wanted to say and do, and his body just wasn't keeping up with him. And they just gave him lots of sweet, loving care. They gave him a back rub and, helped him to move his legs so that he could exercise a bit. And he was just talking and asking them how they were and was so concerned about them and what they were doing with their lives. And he began hemorrhaging again at that time, hemorrhaging in his stomach, and of course he would be throwing up a lot of blood. But they got that slowed down a bit, and about that time the children and I came over before church so that we could be with him as well. And then they left, and again he was just so animated and just was talking with so much more strength than ever before. And he just had kind of a different aura about him with just such love and peace. And he just went right around the room with each child and asked them how they were and what did they do during the weekend. And each of them told them what they were up to. And he would say, "Oh, that's good, or now make sure that you do this," and just kind of giving them, last minute counsel. And he told each one of them, of course, that he loved them. And we had such a nice visit. And he said, I don't want to be late for church. You better hurry up and go. But I just so appreciate you being here. It just means so much to me. And he just seemed like he felt so good that I felt it was okay to leave and go take the children to church. And so we had just, Mom and I had been up with the entire bishopric in the teacher's quorum room because Kimball was being set apart as the counselor in his teacher's quorum. And so we had just come down the stairs, and one of the sisters told us that Gerald had just called from the hospital, and he was quite concerned. He was hemorrhaging again and wanted me to get there right away. And so we just dropped everything and really excited presents. He made sure that our kids got home. Mom and I went over to the hospital. And again, although he was continuing to hemorrhage, he still just had so much he wanted to say, and he was just so appreciative of every little thing that we did. Mom would put a pillow under one arm or readjust another shoulder or just do some little thing, and he just was just so appreciative and just kept telling her how much he loved her. And we just had a nice visit, and again just had so much he wanted to say, and just kept talking about what a beautiful day it was to have such sweet friends come over that morning and help him when he just felt so, he said he felt claustrophobic. He just needed to get out of that bed, and was so grateful that they would come over and help him to sit up and that kind of thing, talk with him. Again, by evening, by 10 or so, he seemed, like he was still doing so well that I told Mom, and Chuck had come over by this time and massaged his feet and a few things, and I told him to go ahead and go on home because I would be there, and I'm sure that would be enough. He just seems so well. And then a few hours later, by that time, the nurse started telling me that it was asking me if there was someone that I should be calling to have be here, and I couldn't understand. I didn't think it was that serious. I didn't want to believe that it was. And she said, "Well, I really don't think he's going to last out tonight." And then I started to face reality and recognize a lot of the signs that his body was shutting down. And so I called Mother and Chuck, and they came back, and his brother Tim. And of course he came immediately, and we started our vigil. By this time, Mom, was it earlier before you left the first time that doctor came in and he had that vision?
No,
It was later, the second time you came back.
At 2 in the morning.
Okay, that was what it was. His gastrostomy tube that was draining the contents of his stomach wasn't draining fast enough. He was just hemorrhaging so quickly that it couldn't drain fast enough, and so he was spitting up a lot. And at one point I realized it was clogged, and that was the only thing that was draining that. And so in order to keep him from having to throw up a lot, they didn't dare put an NG tube down his throat, to suck it out as they had before, because his platelet count was so low. They were afraid if they scraped him at all and started to bleed somewhere else in his throat, that would even be 100 times worse. So they didn't do that. And I tried with all my force to push in some air and water and suck it out to try to unjam it. And for months I had been taking care of that tube, and never ever had it been so totally clogged. It was the strangest thing. And so we had to call down to the service to get one of the doctors who worked in the area that had put it in to come and take care of it, see if they could figure out what to do, because we didn't dare leave it clogged. And the minute this Dr. Wilcox walked into the room, Lily, his nurse, and I had been trying with all our might to get it open, and then as soon as he walked in the room, we could see it begin to drain. It just started to drain, and we couldn't figure out, now, why did it do that? And we were laughing with the doctor, so you're not going to believe us that we even needed you here. And so, we just all laughed about it, and he came over and kind of worked on it to see and changed the dressing and fiddled with the pump and a few things, and ended up spending about a half an hour in the room. And I was standing, of course, right next to Gerald, and next to the pump there, and he, all this time, he had his eyes closed and was laying back, and it was like you could tell he was thinking or listening closely to what we were saying, and his eyes, there was eye movement behind his eyelids, and he, the doctor started to walk around to the foot of the bed to leave, and he grabbed my hand, Gerald did, and said, "Did he get the message, Dr. Wilcox, did he get the message?" And I looked at him, Dr. Wilcox, and he looked at me, and he just kind of shrugged and thought, I don't know what he's talking about. And I said, "I don't think so, dear, but it's all right." And the doctor left the room, and the nurse left the room. And he said, "I have just had the most beautiful experience." He said, and he kept his eyes closed this entire time, "I have seen a vision. It's like a video camera playing over and over again in my head. It keeps repeating, here it goes again. It's the third time now." And he said, "I can see it. I'm bearing testimony to Dr. Wilcox and to Lily." He says, they're just too preoccupied right now to hear it, and so they don't hear it now. He didn't get the message, but he will. When there's a quiet moment, the Spirit will bear testimony to him of what I am seeing. And he said, the atonement was for us. And he said, I can see this, be bearing this testimony of the atonement. I see that the Christ is coming very soon. And he went through and told us several things like that. And he said, it is so beautiful. He says, I feel it so strongly, I cannot deny it. And then he kind of leaned back and relaxed, and he said, oh, I just feel so good about myself. So good. And he was so at peace. And he said, I'm tired. Okay, I'm checking out now. and he just lay back and then he'd something. Oh, and then and then he'd say, and every time the doctor came near my bed and started to work on me, I could see pictures of his family and things about him. Oh, he is so special. We must fellowship him. He and Lily have got to be fellowshipped. He said, if I don't make it out of this and I can't do it, and having them come to our home, then we must do it. Call Paul and Dave, Paul Schertz and Dave Schertz and Paul Demeter. Get them to work with the missionaries and to work with these families. And he said there are two others, Jose, and I couldn't remember his last name, a nurse, but I know who he meant. And he said Dr. Newman, and both of them had borne testimony too when he was in there on earlier stays. And one time, this Jose, this nurse, young man, just as we were bearing testimony to him and talking to him about Jesus, in fact, he came in the room to ask us about him because he knew that Gerald was a minister. And he, just as we were bearing our testimony, Dale White came in, and he was just the perfect person to talk to him because between the three of us, we were able to say such sweet things to this young man, and he just really was touched and left his name with us and his phone number so we could call him again. And Dale went out to his car and got him a Book of Mormon, and Gerald gave it to him later in the day. And so these four people, Gerald said it's just essential that they're very special. They must be told the gospel. He said they still have the right to reject it if they choose, but we must tell it to them. And he was so adamant about that. And then he just kind of, again, relaxed back and said, oh, this has been such a perfect day. He said, well, physically and spiritually. Spiritually because of this wonderful vision I've just had. And physically because of the sweet, tender, loving care that I've received this day. From my friends this morning, having my sweet family around me, loving my children. And then you, Pat, the sweet things you're doing for me, and my dear wife. And he just kept talking about how much he appreciated all of the kindnesses and just the little gentle things that people were doing for him. And he had been in pain. They had to step up the morphine. He was hemorrhaging and dying, and yet he thought it was so beautiful physically because of the kindnesses. I'm sorry, because of the gentle care that he had been receiving. And then, am I leaving anything out, Mom, about what else did he say about his that time? Do you recall?
Yeah, the manifestation. And two other times he said, I have something else I must tell you. And someone would come in the room.
That's right. He said, there's another story I need to tell you. And each time he wasn't able to because someone would come in the room. So we don't know what else he wanted to share with us. But then he no longer was really talking out loud very much. He continued to talk, but we could barely understand any of the words. And of course his eyes were closed all the time, and he was laying back, sitting up in bed, and his mouth is just continuously going. It's just you could just see his mouth moving, and barely hearing sounds. And every now and then would hear a word here and there, something about fishing, and then something about this, and something something about his work, and then something about the children, and just we just kept hearing phrases here and there, but hardly understanding any of it. And then he started moving a lot in the bed, especially his arms and hands. He went like this, raised his hands up. He went like this. He made some gestures, very definite things with his hands. And at one point he said, "Give me your hand, extend me your hand." And so we thought that he needed help moving or something, so Chuck hurried him on one side of the bed, and I stood it on the other side, and we thought maybe he wanted to sit up or to move, so we started to take a hold of his arms and move his hands and arms, and he pushed us back and said, "No, we'll do it the Lord's way." And we just looked at each other, and he said, "Extend me your hand." And Chuck took his hand, and Chuck said that he was trying to wrap his hand in the patriarchal grip. And then he relaxed again and was quiet then and fell asleep. And he still continued to have this horrible death rattle sound. And he stayed like that for some time. And all of this occurred really from about 2 o'clock in the morning until at 9:38 when he died. But the last couple of hours he was louder. I kept hearing him say that too, about being so tired. But we couldn't hear everything. And he said that Chuck said he was saying one more week, but no, I'm just too tired. I wonder if he was supposed to stay another week. I guess he wanted to go before the war started. But and then I think he really was just waiting for me to finally accept it and allow him to leave, because Mom and I were sitting there talking, and just a little after, just a quarter after 9 or so, and I said, if there's ever a time that the Lord's going to give us a miracle, it's got to be now, because it's going to be too late. And I said, I guess we have to face the fact He's not going to do that. And if He's not going to, then I wish He'd just hurry up and take him, because enough is enough. And it was at that time then that Gerald started taking those last gasping breaths. And it was a very short time after that that he took his last breath and died. Always thinking of the rest of us and how we were feeling. I really think that he waited for me to accept it and to give him permission to finally go. Then later, as we all talked about it and thought about it, other things came to mind and things made more sense. But we went through that day getting the children home from school and telling each of them. The doctors asked us if we would allow an autopsy on his stomach area, because it was such an extremely rare form of cancer. The doctor had only seen about 15 cases in his entire career, and wanted to know if they could do that in hopes that it might help someone else. And I didn't hesitate for a moment giving them permission to do so, because I knew that that's what Gerald would want. If there were any way that someone could benefit from what he had gone through and not have to go through it themselves, he would be more than willing to have them do that. And so the hospital kept his body before they gave it over to the Price Funeral Home. The next morning, I was laying in bed. It was still quite dark, and I was rather upset, of course, and was sort of talking to Gerald, though he wasn't there. And I was just pleading with him to give me some help, because I needed answers to things I needed to do. And I wished he would explain to me and give me some feeling of comfort and understanding about his death. And there were 4 or 5 things that I really wanted to know what to do. What do I do next about this and this? And though I could not see him, his presence was there with me, and he told me what to do. He went down my list and told me specifically what to do about one thing about the business, another thing about the children. He made me promise that I would take them to Disney World because he had promised them that he would. He explained to me that those last moments before he died, he was being greeted by his loved ones on the other side, and that he was talking to his dad, remembering a fishing trip he'd been on, telling them about the children, his business, the things that he had been doing in his life, just as you would when you greet an old friend. And he was so happy and excited to see them, and there was such a feeling of love there. And he said that it was important that Mother and I, especially Mother, had been present when he made the signs and tokens of the temple, and that that's what he was doing before he passed away, so that we would have that testimony of the temple and the truthfulness of the gospel of Jesus Christ as it was restored by Joseph Smith. And that we could share that testimony with the children when the time was appropriate. And I'm very grateful for that. Brother Demeter was asking me after we had gone over to dress his body in the temple garments if it would be okay if he shared some things that I've shared with him at different times. And again, I couldn't hesitate for a moment to say, yes, it's fine to share these things with your friends when it's appropriate. Because throughout this entire experience, Gerald and I have had the confirmation over and over again when we were asking at first, why? What is it we're doing that we should be doing? Is there something that we're supposed to be learning from this that we haven't learned yet? Why is it continuing? And the message was always back to us that it is no longer for your good, but for those around you who are seeing you go through this struggle. That there are people out there who are to learn from your experience, and that your great mission is in how you deal with this and how valiant you are as you go through it. And so we felt that any time that we could share this experience with others, that it was our responsibility to do so. And that's why I have shared it with you now. Excuse me. I can't think of anything else. Mom, have I left out anything you can remember?
No. You did a beautiful job.
And I know he loved his children. And I know he loved me as we did him. We shall miss him.
The funeral? I felt him at the funeral the night before. And Chuck and I both mentioned that at the funeral as they sang the opening song. We both sang one word of the song, and then we just, we felt speechless because we could feel it so strongly. And that is when they were bringing the casket up, and we didn't know that at the time, because we were in the front row with you, and
I did too.
But we just, we could feel it so strongly a lot of the time, and Chuck has, the neat experiences he was telling you about, but, he can tell about that maybe later on because he may be able to put some more detail into it. But at the viewing, I was doing pretty, well. I wasn't as upset as we'd been some other times, and just going around visiting with people, and it was getting to be kind of a long evening, and we were tired. And the Billy August had come, and I was visiting with them, and Vivian was looking at the pictures we had placed around of Gerald and the family, and she specifically had come up to look at your wedding photo album, and so I sat down on the couch next to her, and it was up kind of near where the casket was, and she was looking at the pictures of you guys in front of the Arizona Temple, which is where you were married, and she asked what temple was that, and I told her, and she was relating how she was so glad that they had finally, just recently, they went through the temple, and was so glad that they had done that before Gerald passed away, because he had been so instrumental in getting Phil mostly reactivated, and of course her as well, but as she was relating these things to me, just practically in a whirlwind, I could just feel the spirit just fill my entire body. It took my breath away, and I was talking, I just couldn't talk anymore, and as plain as if my eyes saw him, of course they didn't, but my heart and my mind could see him just standing there listening, and he was proud of them, what they had done, and she was telling me about their goal they had made to go to as many of the temples around the world as they could, and I said, I just know he'd be so proud to hear that, and knowing at the time he was even there listening, and I know that he could have said something to us if he would have wanted to. He was so tangible there, but he didn't. He just wanted to listen, and I imagine he was probably very happy to, be around the room listening to, and people remembered things that they had done with him, and he had done for them, which were many, and people were talking about it a lot, but I just remembered that everything that I would think of saying sounded so trite. With him standing there, I thought, it's got to be something important I've got to say, what do I want to tell him? Because I know I won't be able to tell him anything for a long time. And, so I really wanted to, tell him. And the most important thing I think that he did in my life was when we moved out here, and him helping us to feel comfortable here and telling me about everything that was going on around. It's something that's very important to me, and I love to do things in the area, going to cider mills and festivals, and he would tell me about anything that he heard of. He read in the paper. He'd send the article home with Chuck to me, and called me from the hospital several times telling me about things that were going on, and so I was relating those things to Vivian, more trying to tell them to him, but as I felt him standing there, and then I could just gradually feel that not that he had left, but that he just moved on. I could still feel him present, but not as near. And the rest of the whole evening, and I could feel him really present. It was wonderful.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Do you have any feelings you'd like to share?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we were away the last year and a half. And I guess through having occasional contact, you were probably so close to it, but Jerry went through a transformation. He was always a good man, and always kind and considerate, but from the time he became bishop, there was just a distinct transformation. He became so loving and kind, and last June, the last time I was up here, he was so content with his life. He was content with the mission he had to perform. He was content with what he had done. He was cherishing every moment that he had, because he knew his time was limited. And he was so positive, so Christ-like. But it was obvious that he had made a decision and set on a route to perfect himself to a level that think most of us can only aspire to, because he knew he had a definite time to do that in. And it's more than obvious from comments here and comments from so many people that he had tremendous success in achieving all that we're all striving for. And yet we look to have many years to do that, and he had only months and weeks and accomplished it. And I think it's a great testament that we can all go forward and try to accomplish and achieve that. His life was a success in every facet. He completed his mission, and he's on to bigger and better things that we don't know about, but we will.
I was rereading his patriarchal blessing this morning, and it does refer in there to how he will be in dangerous places in his lifetime, but that he'll be able to return home to his family unharmed, able to associate with them once again. And he had probably 6 or 7 times in this last year and a half when he was hospitalized or put through surgery or various dangerous places where he very, very easily could have been taken. And it said in there that he will live as long as life was sweet unto him. And it said what a special mission that he had on this earth to perform. And that when it was over, it would only be over when he I've forgotten the exact words, but when he felt joy in the accomplishment as his Father in heaven would. So apparently that mission is now over, and I know how busy he must be in the spirit world. Months ago, when we went to in August, I guess it was, for the dedication of the Toronto Temple, he wanted so much to go, but he just really couldn't go. And so he encouraged the children and I to go up and back in a day, and if we hurried and drove quickly enough, we could make it, and I could be back in time to take care of his needs 12 hours later when he needed to be hooked up again to his IV and nutrition. And so we planned our time as quickly and as well as we could to hurry up and back. And as we were sitting in there waiting for the dedication to begin, I was pleading with the Lord again to please heal him and to preserve his life, and asked him, I was just going through listing all the times that Gerald had accepted callings and how I had magnified each of those callings and how I had supported him in every one, and that whatever he wanted to ask him to do in the future, whatever calling he had, I would support him in it, just to please to help him to get well. And the very strong, very deep voice came into my heart and said, "But will you support him if that calling is on the other side?" And that was a hard one to answer. My first thought was no. But as I sat there longer, I realized that I had to accept that calling as well. So I, in essence, was forewarned. But it's always hard to accept when it really happens.
There's a lot of things that I could probably say about Cheryl and our relationship together. But I'm not very good at that sort of thing. So I just want to let you know how much I loved you. And what an example he was to me in our life. Probably if it hadn't been for our relationship as we were growing up, as children, as teenagers, in the situation that I was in, I may not have been very strong in the church, may have gone another way. So I probably owe my spiritual life to Gerald. And I really appreciate that. I've grown to love you and your family. If there's anything that we can do for you in the future, please know that we will be there.
I know. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Gerald told me lots of stories of West and who were the other two cousins that you always seemed to Stuart and Sherwood and Tony Shumway. But you guys were always getting into one thing or another. Yeah, had a good childhood.
After I moved down to Atlanta, every time I talk to him, I kind of joke with him that he's spoiled. Because seeing him as bishop, and the things that he did for everybody else when they would move the welcome I would come. Because when I moved to a different ward, I expected that. You know? And when it didn't happen, I almost felt a little left out or bad, because to compare someone to what he did is almost an unfair comparison. Because he was just so, I just remember working with him, he was so concerned about making sure that everybody was there every single Sunday, sitting up on the stand. He would go through the ward list and physically write down the name of everybody that wasn't there that should have been. And he found out whether they had a valid reason and he'd follow up on it. Because he wanted everybody to be there. And he taught me a lot. When I lost my job up here and was looking for a job, he had no doubts. He just said, "You've been doing what the Lord wants. The Lord's going to take care of you." And so when I found a job, he said, "See?" You know, I mean, there was no question at this point. And I guess in our family, in talking about coming up here, there was really no question, because I think more than anybody else, he's probably done more for Tina and my marriage than anybody else. Because he was the one that started Tina resolving some of the past issues, some of the problems, and our marriage now is out there, and that's something that will always remain. And we will work friendship.
I know we had lots of fun going out to eat until he could no longer eat. That was probably the worst thing about being ill, is his not being able to eat any food or drink anything but sips of water. As much as he loved food.
Especially that Thai restaurant.
That Thai restaurant was his favorite. I can remember, you were talking about that welcome wagon thing. He really did. Anybody that knew that came in the ward area, he wanted to make sure that they moved into our ward. And he gave them the name of the realtor, who isn't a member of the church, but Adrian always knew exactly what our ward boundaries are. And she was instructed that if she helped them to find a home, that she was to find a home within those ward boundaries. And she always did. I think she helped about 10 different families find homes within our ward boundary. But I remember one time he was too sick to even drive the car himself. And he took his barf bucket with him, and he had me drive this new family around so that he could be sure that they had seen all the things that he felt like only he could tell them. And all the places to rent and buy and the best places to shop. He enjoyed doing that.
Telling your dad last night, Jerry he always liked a good joke, and he could always tell such a good joke. I'd known him about 6 or 8 months, and I knew Jerry, and we played racquetball, but I hadn't talked to him on the phone very much. It was about, I guess probably it was around tax season, it was in March, and so he called me up, and I didn't know who it was. He said, this is John Smith with the IRS, and we have now begun looking over your 1983 tax return, and we have a few questions. And he had me go on for 30 minutes. I had made an appointment. He was down to the point he was giving me directions on how to get to the building. And then he finally told me, and he said, Glenn, he said, I was really going to meet you at the federal building. And he had told me what forms to bring. He told me what information I needed to have. But he said, I figured if I met you there, that you'd never talk to me again. So I decided. I said, Jerry, I'll get you for this.
He was the biggest practical joker. He had one guy, Lenny Geldof, convinced. He even had an off-duty officer deliver a subpoena for his arrest. Not his arrest, but a subpoena for something to appear in court because he was caught snagging salmon against the law at midnight. And he had a lawyer friend draw this legal paper up. I mean, it was quite elaborate. And poor Lenny, he really thought he was in trouble at first.
You had a policeman deliver it?
Yeah, the whole business. I mean, it was really funny. Lenny got us back in different ways.